Everybody, happy Friday night. Today is December 15th, 2023. We are across the pitch. A little festive today with the Christmas trees in the background. Jose, I'm going to go to you first, sir. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, man. As I had told you, we part of being a dad, you know this well, Mike and Dave. If you ever find a significant other or whatever to recreate, procreate, whatever you want to say, you'll figure out that kids get sick often, and they get sick so randomly. So I actually wasn't quite sure if I was going to be able to make it due to having a surprisingly quick visit to the urgent care for my 19-month-old who out of nowhere starting 3 p.m. developed pink eye. So yeah, that was the surprise this evening.
I'm honestly, you told me you were going to urgent care. I was like, he's will be back tomorrow because they always take 3 hours, if not more. So welcome back. That was a nice little turnaround for you. Dave, how you doing over there, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I mean, always good to be back on the podcast, discuss some union. And, it's been a very, very, very interesting week, not just regarding the union, but the MLS and the US game as a whole. And I'm sure, I think as Jose put it in our little group chat earlier, very convenient that some of the news that came out today was, Friday evening. Try and bury it within the other news or the Friday rush. So
little did they know that we were going to talk about it tonight across the pitch. So they can't hide from us. But go ahead, Dave.
Exactly. I was going to say, we'll make sure that we discuss it. I think, it's good to be back on the podcast, did get the chance to obviously be on the show when well, yeah, a lot of exciting things happened today, Carl. No, but again, I didn't get the chance to be on the podcast, obviously, after the disappointing Cincinnati loss, and of course, since then we've crowned the MLS Cup champions. Yeah, I'm just glad to be back. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm very good. I am rocking a little coffee with honey, as well as my absolutely outstanding coquito that I'm just slowly sipping on tonight. What are you drinking there, Jose? What is that?
This is Wiggle, a straight bourbon out of Pittsburgh. I think it's like a $50 bottle. Recommend. Very, very good, especially for a Pennsylvania bourbon. I strongly recommend the Wiggle if you're interested.
I don't mind wiggling, so I'll check it out. Valerie is joining us tonight. She says Pittsburgh. Listen, we're going to talk a little Pittsburgh because I'm sure I saw the Twitter for the Pittsburgh River Round. What River Hounds? Is that what it is, Jose? Right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They put out a little thing on Twitter about the U.S. Open Cup. And Jillian and Kyle, again, thank you guys for joining us. The one team we agree on, who just interviewed Kevin Kincaid, by the way. So check out that episode if you haven't already. I haven't had a chance to listen to it. I'm sorry, guys. I'll listen to it.
I know and Mike, I don't want to say shame on you because I get it. Time is most valuable asset we all have, but I know we credited them in their episode with Leno, which was required listening, especially if you want to get a behind scenes sort of look into broadcasting, etc., that Dave does and has done over the years. But their conversation with Kincaid was fascinating. And one anecdote that I think you'll really appreciate, and please go listen to their conversation, was the reason why when we go to press conferences with Jim after matches, Union PR, Erica Shear specifically, sometimes some other faces, maybe Nico or Amanda, they ask us, please wait while Jim or whoever exits the stage and they go back to the area. Turns out, story from the podcast, Kevin Kincaid is the reason why, because he and Jim got into a gigantic altercation after one of them to the point that it was a shouting match, and Tim McDermott, of all people, had to restrain one of them from getting into fisticuffs. So, a fascinating story that, someone that has covered the team for 10 plus years and knows it from, its inception can only share. So required listening if you are a Union fan.
Well, I will be at the gym tomorrow, getting a much-needed workout in. I banged on my foot. I don't know, being old. We're 32 at this point. It just everything. You sneeze too hard and your back goes out. So I had a little foot injury this week. I'm feeling better. So tomorrow, Kyle and Jillian, I promise during my workout, I will listen to that interview. And she says, "Thank you for the shout out." Of course, again, the one team we agree on. Very cool people there. Now, we can brag about them all night, but we have things to talk about. We have additions to the Union, as well as some a little bit heated news, as Dave said, come out with the U.S. Open Cup and how MLS is not going to be involving their first teams anymore in the U.S. Open Cup tournament. So where do you guys want to start? Do you want to start on the light news with the additions, Jose? Do you want to go there first?
Yes, sorry, I muted myself because I got my Scooby-Doo dog just running around right now. She hasn't settled in yet for the night. I think that's probably a good way to start, right? Let's start with the light, in terms of what's going on with the union, with the, I guess now 3 editions since we last spoke, right? Or 2 editions, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yep.
turn it over to you.
So they brought in the homegrown. I'm pulling up his name real quick right now to make sure I can get his name correctly because I already know I'm going to butcher it. So they're adding some homegrowns. I also saw the news that Kai, excuse me, is looking to be going to Serbia, possibly, potentially. I know that's been going around right now. So it certainly seems like a left back is being shopped for right now. I saw we had some news coming out as well about people they're looking for overseas. Still nothing really on Bedoya, right? We haven't heard anything from Bedoya yet. Same thing with Kai. It's kind of all up in the air at the moment. Dave, right now we only have seen the homegrowns being signed, although free agency is open. Are you surprised that we haven't seen more of a splash? What's your vibe right now? It's only been a couple days, a brief stint here,
I mean, to be honest, I think I'm not really surprised. I think we saw the way the Union moved last year. I think they didn't really make any early moves today. I think they sort of held off a bit, and then sort of the Pereira and Torres deal sort of came. I'm pretty sure they happened around the same time, which, you know, I'm not too sure on the timeline of when they actually occurred, but I know, like, again, they weren't exactly big splashes at the time. It was more just all familiar, or MLS names, MLS experienced players, which perhaps the Union hadn't done, and perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, obviously, Jose, you reiterated the point of one of your Twitter posts, or X posts, whatever how you want to call it. I think it was yesterday or on Wednesday. Regarding the Union's approach and strategy towards transfers is going to go back to looking at younger players, whether they be younger US players or younger players from abroad. Perhaps going back to what has worked and on their ascent up to where they have gotten so far.
Yep.
So again, seeing the 2 signs they've made so far probably shouldn't be too much of a shock. And again, you've got to hope that they might end up being players that can actually make a difference, as opposed to being like an Orovich or
a
some
Davo.
a Darbo, is that a Davo, even a Bassa, or even Richard Adada at this point.
So the 2 names that we have signed is Isaiah LaFleur from Houston Dynamo 2, and as well as we signed our 21st homegrown for the club with Nick Pariano. And just some stats that the Union put out for Nick. He's right-footed, 5'8". He's only 20 years old. It's weird seeing date of birth after the year 2000. He was born in 2003, which makes me feel extremely old. He's a midfielder weighing at 145 pounds. So Nick Pariano, our 21st edition via homegrown. So again, not too surprising as well, Dave. I agree with you. It's kind of the old Union just kind of bringing up those young guys. But you know what? Here's a young guy we really haven't talked about in the show, Caven Sullivan. So that he's been getting a lot of attention online. I know he's obviously only 14. He's still got a ways to go. His older brother Quinn made his debut when he was 17 years old. So realistically speaking, I guess Jose or Dave, whoever wants to take it first, maybe Dave, if you want to go first. Do you see a future where Caven Sullivan makes his Union first team debut, or do you think he just goes overseas and we don't even get to see him in the MLS?
That's a good question. Again, he's sort of like 14 years old. It's ridiculous, having this sort of talk. It sounds as ridiculous as it sounds. You only ever really see, this sort of talk around, highly rated Brazilian players that have just regenerated out of nowhere, and they'll just you see at the moment, you see the Emmerich, even like the talk about Neymar when he was younger, like Rodrigo, Vinicius. I think Real Madrid signed another spent like 50 million on another Brazilian like last year at some point. Like, you never really see it in terms of like much younger player like anywhere else. But I think it would be quite nice perhaps if he was the youngest age a player can actually play in the MLS at 16 or.
So Freddie Adu made his appearance at 14 years old. Alfonso Davies made his appearance at 15, and there's obviously a few other players, 15, 16, etc.
Okay,
so we've seen it before in MLS. It has been done. I know the Union don't typically do that, but go ahead, Dave.
I'll make an outlandish statement here. I think that what's it called? I think that Ked Sullivan will make his first Union appearance. They're not first team appearance. I think he will play in the Osaka Cup this year.
I could see that, sure. So Yeah, no, I agree. And that's the thing. He turns 15 in September. So he just turned 14, if I remember correctly from looking at his date of birth. So he's still obviously a ways to go. But I was telling somebody online, I think it was Evan, I could see him maybe not this year making his first team call, but maybe at 16 if he's still with us. That seems doable. If Quinn can make it at 17, and his younger brother's obviously getting more attention than Quinn ever did, I don't see why we can't see a brief stint with him. But then again, you have players like Raffanello who have been around a little more, who you'd think would be more involved with the team, and they're not. So it's kind of, you don't really know how the Union approached their youth development. We saw players like Brennan Aronson who got a lot of play at a younger age, and we see someone like Quinn who's shows a lot of spark but doesn't get much time. Or even Brandon Craig, for example, how great he played in the U.S. national camp, and then he kind of just did nothing for both Austin and for the Philly. But Jose, how about you? What do you think about Caden Sullivan?
Well, I just want to be super clear. I'm a firm believer
Sure.
that if you are good enough, you are old enough in terms
Bingo.
of playing soccer.
Mhm.
But let's also not forget that this kid, whether he's Jewish or not, I don't know, but he's 1 year removed from being able to celebrate a bat mitzvah. So there's also that to keep in mind, right? Like he's barely just over that threshold. So let the kid's got to, live. But, when you think about how old, right. And, in Europe, that doesn't really matter, right? You got kids coming in at 16, 17-year-olds. You have these Brazilian in South America, the guy who just signed for Real Madrid, Endrick, I think, who's like, who's like a starlet, barely 17 or 18. I don't even remember. So, and just for another point of reference, David Beckham, when he was signed for United as a youth, obviously was super young, but his debut came, I think, at 17. So, and that's obviously at Old Trafford, the stadium, the whatever they call it, the whatever of dreams, the stage of dreams. I forget what they call it, Dave, out in the UK, but nonetheless, I personally believe that Caven will never see the light of MLS. Right?
Really?
When you
And
have,
not even, yeah, go ahead.
I don't believe so, because he's got
Wow.
folks from Dortmund, he's got folks all over Europe already keeping an eye on him. And frankly, I have no inside information. And if it was off the record, I wouldn't be able to share it with you guys. So this is why I'm like completely speculating. I think that the treatment that Quinn has gotten in terms of the Union of having this quick rise up the ranks and then suddenly gigantic plateau, whether it's deserved or not, I don't know. Whether he's a great practice player or not, that's a completely different conversation as well. Though Jim did mention that he had that fantastic week of practice that led to him playing that one playoff game this year, whether it was, I think it was the second New England game, whatever. I don't think that the family's probably happy. So I think what they might do is probably just let him ride the system until it's time for him to disappear, just like the Zambrano kid who left the Philadelphia
Yeah.
Union and went to Benfica. So no skin off their back, right? Benfica got a wonderful player who's performing at the under 23 level right now, who the Union had an opportunity to sign. So are they apples to apples? I don't know. I haven't really watched Caven outside of, everybody looks fantastic on 2-minute highlight clips, right?
His highlights are so good, though.
Right. So, and I didn't watch Zambrano, but apparently Zambrano's good enough for an academy like Benfica, who developed players like, gosh, you think of all the Argentines that went through there. You think about the Portuguese players that went through there that are now, unbelievable talents in Europe. Manchester City, for example, and all their Portuguese that went through or are there. So, in my opinion, I don't think that Philadelphia Union get a taste of the Caven Sullivan experiment unless it's at the tail end of the career. But in terms, go ahead, Mike.
No, I'll say, so his brother, he's the youngest goal scorer in our club's history. He was 17 years, 2 months, and 30 days. And that was, of course, the bicycle kick that he performed out in, was it Chicago, right? Yeah, Chicago.
It was Chicago,
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's not terribly far off in terms of years. I mean, I can see if he can stick around for one more year, late 15, early 16, I could see him making it, especially with all the competition the Union are involved in. We're bringing people up for 10 different things. You could see him for a couple minutes, but go ahead, Jose. Finish your thought there.
No, I was going to turn the page, right?
Okay.
I think maybe reasonable minds can defer, right? Davis under his thinking that, yes, he will see it, and maybe it's this year in some way, shape, or form with whatever. And I know we'll talk about it, whether it's possible or not. I don't know in terms of the U.S. Open Cup. But somebody who I think may or may not have an opportunity. That's a different conversation. It's Nick Pariano, right? New signing, played at Duke. has been through the system. In fact, I posted a picture today after doing some more digging. Him, Sullivan, Craig, McGlynn, straight up spent time in January with the U.S. National team under 20. So there's obviously a lot of Philadelphia Union flowing through him. And I think he even played in Atlantic City, I think, when he wasn't playing for Duke in terms of like, you know, a pro, but not like a pro team. I think he's one that's obviously going to really benefit from this new change in terms of the US Open Cup as players who maybe are sharing time between Union 2 and the Union specifically. Though when you think about 50 potential games, do you really even want to trot those legs out there for the US Open Cup? I don't know. But I had reached out to, the name escaping me right now, the guy who he is actually currently a student coach out at the PSV Academy, Mark Kelkenberg, who did an incredible 11-minute video. I posted it on my social media feed if you want to get a look at Nick and what he can provide in terms of his senior year at Duke. And frankly, I see a lot of good stuff in terms of distribution, in terms of tactical skill or technical skill rather, as well as, you know, brains, right? Like the ball's coming at you, one touch to get rid of it if you have three people around you, that type of thing. So an exciting signing, not a splashy signing, though. I think people need to remember the January window is not here yet in terms of Europe. Right. So if the Union are looking to bring players in, that's when it's going to happen. Right now it's all intra-league, which Dave, you had asked about that when a Torres or a Perea happened. It was pretty well into preseason, if I recall. So it's not like it happened now. I think it was closer to like February at the time.
Yeah, because I don't remember obviously the World Cup was around, it just started as well, but I couldn't remember the Union actually making like any moves early on in like the postseason. But
I don't think so either.
I think perhaps it's a welcome. Perhaps it is a welcome to perhaps see them perhaps biding their time. Well, say biding their time. Perhaps it's a bit more of a welcome look at them. You know, perhaps going back to what has made them so successful over the years. But again, just to go back to the obviously the youth point again, as you sort of talked about the Emmerich and the Cade Sullivan situation. Like the interesting thing, Cade Sullivan's still 14. He's literally a child. Like he's got so much growing to do left. Like an interesting point of view. So obviously, we all know I don't want to like. I guess I know Gareth Bale's a very sensitive subject and topic amongst the Philadelphia Union, but at that same age, Gareth Bale was on the brink of being released by Southampton, and probably his footballing career would have been killed off because, you know, he was still growing. He couldn't move. His body was just in pain because he was growing so much and suffering growing pains. Like, again, 14 years old. I mean, Cade Sullivan's great now, but who knows what he could be like in 2 or 3 years for better or worse, which isn't a knock on him, but like he still is just a child. Do you know what I mean? Like he could end up growing up. Probably he won't, but he could end up growing to like 6'2", 6'3", and he just completely throws the game that he does play. Or no.
So, and also to Jose's previous interview with Marlon LeBlanc, the Union 2 head coach, and I remember Jose, correct me if I'm wrong, he emphasized how much they cater to development and doing it the Union way, and the Union will almost, you know, as to Marlon's point, sacrifice winning in a way to focus on that development, make sure they do things the right way. So I could see them holding off on his advancement to the next level, just simply because, to your point, Dave, he is still 14. He's still physically growing. Like that does change the way a player, you know, is on the field with the way he moves, the way his speed, everything.
Yeah, to your point, to what you mentioned, Dave, you know, like I still remember and I chuckle about it because I don't want to say I'm a late bloomer, but I still remember that summer in between 8th grade here in the States and going into 9th grade, right? You go from being a middle schooler to a high school kid, and just I myself did not grow like a lot of my peers did. So I remember that summer where like, yeah, I was working out, running, whatever. But then suddenly like my friends who were about the same height and same width in terms of like shoulders suddenly like doubled. And I'm like stuck being, you know, 5'7" or whatever I was at the time. Now, fast forward college, I turn into a 5'10" man and 170 pounds versus what I was in high school, like, you know, 5'6", maybe 120 pounds, like wet. So like very, very interesting how that happens. But to your point, Mike, in terms of like Caven, I think the union would welcome any opportunity to get that kid and his family to put pen to paper.
Yeah.
Because of the talent that he is. So like, let's not discount the idea that the union see him as literally dollar signs flying out the window if he goes somewhere else.
Yeah,
of course.
But I think obviously just got questions. I don't know if the rules or things are different. With the MLS, obviously because he's 14, would the union still get a compensation fee or a fee for him, or would it be a case of anyone can just pluck him from the union?
That I'm not sure about, and I think that's a conversation. I'm going to make a note of it to reach out to one of my contacts who might be better versed on this type of stuff. And maybe I'll circle back with you, and maybe next time we get together, I'll make sure to mention, hey, like we figured this out, whatever, like a correction maybe, or like just added listening, because that's an interesting point, right? Because in England, that is how it goes, right? There's always a payment that goes to the youth club or the developmental club after so many levels or ladders that, somebody goes to. In fact, that was a contentious point, whether you know it or not, with PA Classics out in Lancaster, with the transfer of Christian Pulisic from Dortmund to Chelsea, where PA Classics out of Lancaster was saying, yo, like this, you guys just shelled out a whole lot of money, or Dortmund, you just got a whole lot of money from Chelsea. We need to get a cut. Like, we helped develop him. But obviously it's very different than the United States, since it's very much pay to play.
Gotcha. Listen, not a lot of splashes for the union on the offseason. I know, actually, Jose, before we go to Open Cup, which I know is what everyone wants to talk about, you did actually mention some of the offseason moves away from the field in the staff, the groundskeeping crew in particular. Why don't you share some of that? That is also important news, by the way, those non-playing moves. I want to hear a little bit of that, and then we'll go to the U.S. Open Cup.
Yeah, it's unbelievable in terms of the opportunity I've gotten to know some people behind the scenes this off season. Obviously, I've been a little removed in terms of my attention, but the distraction was great while dealing with some family stuff with my brother's death. But a lot of movement. Not sure if it's usual for this time of year in terms of professional soccer, but the union have had, in the span, I guess, of a month, right? Or at least I've gotten to find out of two very important staff members in terms of the head data, not analytics, but sort of like performance coach, as well as the fitness coach, leaving with Walter Grandes and Medi, whose last name I'm not going to try to pronounce, and I apologize, Medi. But also CJ Buck, head groundskeeper, leaving the Philadelphia Union. For reasons I cannot share and I'm not willing to share. It was not something I'm gonna just put out there. I think that's a story that can be shared by somebody else. But someone who spent the better part of 6 years making sure that every single time you and I, Mike and Dave, watching through the TV, made sure that field was as beautiful as it always looked. Make sure that it was taken care of, especially this year when you think about the load of games that happened. So CJ Buck, moving on. I can say it's not within MLS, but unfortunately we lost one, and I am continually digging from time to time to hear who the next person is, and honestly just to reach out and see if we can talk to them, because I think this person, whoever it is going to have some big shoes to fill. CJ was fantastic and leaves a good crew behind.
What's the thing? You have to think of how important that is. Like, it really is. Look at the Super Bowl when the Eagles played the was it the Eagles Super Bowl with the Chiefs, right? And how bad that field was. And they said, like, we spent $800,000 on this field, blah, 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 blah. It was shit. So it's obviously that the bad groundskeeper could really mess up a game. It honestly could. So it's a big loss. I think that might, hopefully, one we keep an eye on, see how the field looks this year. Go ahead.
Mike, it's so interesting. Those are three positions now that I think about it, right? In terms of Walter Grandes being, such an important figure in terms of analytics and making sure that the body stay healthy. Medi making sure that the fitness is high so they can endure these grueling seasons. And then CJ Buck making sure that the health of the field is actually good so we can enjoy as journalists and fans alike watching good soccer, right? Because players now are used to watching basically soccer on top of carpets versus watching videos of Diego Armando Maradona, who's dribbling around and the ball's hopping around like a rabbit, right, as he's dribbling. But, those are three positions that you don't hear a lot about, but that's good because it means that they're doing their job.
That's
Versus if you
true.
were hearing about them, that something's wrong, right? It's almost like a music producer, right? If the music is shit or the music is wrong or something's off, you're going to figure out who it is. But if the music's just fine or you're enjoying it, you're not going to seek out who did X, Y, or Z on it, right? So
It was like when the Eagles had those injuries, like right with the Super Bowl run, they had got hurt every single year, and you're like, who is on the medical staff that can't keep these guys healthy? We talk about the Eagles medical staff more in those 2 years than I think we ever have in the entire time that I've ever been a fan.
That's so funny you mentioned that. I didn't even think about that specific issue, but that's right. When WIP is talking about medical staff members, that
That's when
something's gone really wrong.
That's when because like everyone was hurt that year. So go ahead, Dave. Yep.
It's like a 3-year stint, wasn't it? It was the 2017, 18, and 19 years, obviously.
Everybody.
The Eagles. I was thinking again, like as sort of Jose said, that like you look at that the MLS, especially you look at some of the pitches they play on. The turf isn't great, there's always a big point raised, but like you just look at that, the Union's pitch was one of the best in the league by a country mile. You just sort of see, and that can be quite a concern, seeing what does happen with the change of groundsman. Will the level be maintained? Will the quality be maintained? That's probably a big thing to look at going into the new year, because the way that the pitch is done can impact where a team plays. If you want to play the ball on the ground and the pitch is a bit bobbly, a bit uneven, like that completely throws off the way the game's played.
Dave, it's not even like the main pitch, right? You think about Subaru Park, and that's obviously one piece of it, but even like practice fields, right? Like if they can't practice on surfaces that are acceptable for a professional nowadays, again, going back to old videos of Diego Armando Maradona dribbling on fields where like the ball comes up to your chin as you're just going, 5 yards, whatever. You just can't be successful. So it's a huge loss. And I really, really wish, Mike, I would have known about CJ leaving prior to the end of season press conference, because that's one name I would have made sure to have asked about, because that is no small feat to get that field to look as good as it does throughout the season, as Dave kind of points out. It is such a bummer. I wasn't sort of like, flagged. It wasn't flagged to me that CJ was leaving, despite happening.
The only time that field has injured somebody, to my knowledge, is when Michael Ua stepped on the sprinkler this past year and twisted his ankle. That is the only time I thought, like, that's an interesting way to get hurt. It's been great.
It was fascinating, too, during Leagues Cup, where, like, they made sure that within the rectangle that is the soccer field, right, the 100-plus yards plus 80, or across 80 yards, whatever, it was pristine. But then, like, the warm-up areas and all that could have looked like shit, though they didn't. They looked just fine. They had to fill in with sand because you have 8 dudes literally running up and down the same the same end zone, basically getting ready, whatever. Like, that there's no redeeming that, especially for the quantity of home matches that was Leagues Cup in July and August. You remember that slog, Mike. I'm genuinely sad to see CJ go, and I'm genuinely sad that I didn't know that he was leaving prior to the press conference, because like I said, I think that's the difference, and I have some interesting conversations coming up. That's the difference between media now in terms of the Philadelphia Union versus maybe 10 years ago, where no one would have known of a CJ Buck. No one would have known of a Walter Grandes or a Medi, right? Because the interest wasn't there. But then we have people like myself and some others, some folks from the Inquirer bring this type of stuff up from time to time. But like, we're just so zoned in and interested that's a good sign that Philadelphia Union is starting to like continue to grow in terms of attention.
Well, I think it's a good segue here, Jose, to changes that are happening and where the league is paying attention to. So for those who did not hear the news, again, the MLS teams will not be participating with their first teams in the U.S. Open Cup moving forward. I know the reactions online were pretty heated. I know Kyle actually brings up a question, his honest question for Jose. Do you know if the MLS teams will use their MLS Next Pro names on their first team names? So we'll get to that in a second. But basically, everyone on Twitter is up in arms because the U.S. Open Cup is the longest standing tournament in the country. It pins teams from multiple levels against each other, right? We saw Pittsburgh playing great last year and knocking off the Crew. We see the excitement that we've had as Union fans going to the U.S. Open Cup finals and hosting them and unfortunately losing, but besides the point. So it's been a pretty heated debate, and the three of us already talked about this, and we mentioned the comparison to the FA Cup and the Open Cup. So, Dave, I'm going to go to you first since you're the outsider looking in here. What are your thoughts on MLS kind of shifting away from Open Cup, which is very much a money grab or money decision? But go ahead.
I feel like the first two things I can think of is, one, it further isolates the MLS from the rest of football in America. Sure. And secondly, it just massively highlights that how much of probably an influence Apple TV has on the MLS. I feel like if it was an Apple TV competition, or if the game, didn't have its own, what's the word? If if the Open Cup, actually had its own broadcast as opposed to, what was it, Bleacher Report and YouTube, wherever it's on.
Yeah, right.
They started to, Dave, just to save you from comments. They started to, especially during the knockout rounds, mainly because Messi was involved. Paramount picked up the rights and broadcasted those latter stages of the game. Just to be super, I'm an idiot. My brain remembers dumb shit like that, so I just wanted to clarify that. So there was a little bit of actual broadcast.
Obviously, I think the early stage. I think you just think if obviously Apple TV owns. Well, what he can own, the American brand, under the umbrella is obviously the Leagues Cup and obviously MLS coverage in the playoffs. But you think, like, if perhaps the Open Cup was involved in that sort of that umbrella as well, would the MLS have gone? Would this decision have been made if Apple TV actually owned the rights to the US Open Cup? And you probably have to think no.
I have my own thoughts. Jose, I'll let you go next before I kind of get into comparisons here.
Yeah, this is such an interesting topic for many obvious reasons, right? The longest tenured American tournament, all of its history, all of its legacy. We continued again to bring up the comparison we made in a group chat, right? Like, Dave, as a Brit, what if the FA Cup, like suddenly Manchester City, Arsenal, all of these Premier League clubs, Chelsea, United, suddenly say, yeah, we'll send the under 23 kids or the under 20 kids to go and compete. Suddenly the ratings or the interest in a competition like that plummet, which is exactly what I think will happen with this. I think there's going to be a very loyal group. Suddenly, I think the rights to stream it, whether it's YouTube or Paramount Plus, just got a hell of a lot cheaper. But this is turning a corner, I think, in terms of U.S. international soccer, because this continues to put, we kept on hearing, and maybe this is, MLS 3.0, 2.0, whatever, where, there was sort of an initiative by Bruce Arena and I forget who came after him, Bob Bradley, in terms of let's make sure we get MLS guys in there. Well, this is not going to give an opportunity to these USL guys to challenge themselves against these higher quality players and seeing these upsets. And Dan says it here, right? I really do believe that the MLS does not like the image that's painted. And I'm sorry, Mike, if you're going to hit on this, but I really don't think that Don Garber and company likes the image of a lower seeded or a lower level outfit coming in and running shop, right? We saw a lot of upsets last year, but that's because, you have teams like the Union, who last year, maybe not a great example. And frankly, it hasn't really happened to the Union, I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like last year, or in the previous years, we're trotting folks like Fontana, we're trotting the Jack McGlynn's before he becomes who he is.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay.
The Stuart Finley game. Don't forget
that's right.
that.
We're basically trotting the U23s as is. So maybe the Union's not as affected as maybe some of these other teams who like, okay, well, we have 5 competitions. Realistically, the way our roster's built, we can only focus on 1 or 2. And it's definitely not gonna be now called CCC, formerly CCL, because they didn't qualify. So their options are limited now, right? Leagues Cup, the League, or the US Open Cup. And I guess Leagues Cup now, so that turns into 4. Pick your poison. So it's disappointing, but I think that there is one group who is probably out in Bethesda cheering like crazy because that's where their headquarters are, and that is the MLSPA. This is less strain on its members in
Sure.
terms of games and matches being played. So the
And that's
MLSPA,
partially due to League's Cup, but go ahead.
no, yeah, and it's totally part of League's Cup, right? You think about how many games did the Union play? 6 or 7 during League's Cup, right?
Yeah, they played one against Minnesota for the Open Cup, which was a banger of a game, but go ahead.
Right. But League's Cup it was 7, right? The 3 group stages, or 2 group stage games, and then the Monterey third place game. So whatever it added up to. Nonetheless, the Union are actually fortunate that maybe they exited when they did against Minnesota in the U.S. Open Cup, because then otherwise that number would have spiked probably closer to 55 or so, and depending on how far they would have gone. So I know at this point I'm just going on and on and on, but it's I'm happy in a way for the players, right? We've heard Andre Blake be very loud, very vocal in terms that something has to change. Our bodies cannot endure this. Ernst Tanner also in the press conference mentioning it. So I'm happy for them, but I'm also really sad. This could be the death blow to this competition unless there's a way that the U.S. Open Cup committee figures out a way how to spin this in a positive way, right? In terms of like, be a loyal supporter, or I don't know, whatever the hell they're going to come up with to like entice people to watch this, because unless this is free on YouTube, I think there's very little reason to watch now in the later stages.
I'm going to say Dan's point first, and I'll go to my point, because we're all to blame for this tournament being gone, but I'll get to that in a second. So it says, what does MLS do when a USL club qualifies for the CONCACAF Champions Cup? So that's the thing. There's still a spot open. Am I correct in saying that a U.S. Open Cup winner will still advance to the CCC or the C cube or C3?
They'll 100%. They'll move that to the runner-up of the MLS Cup, I reckon.
I think changes will happen.
Pretty upset. Okay, I'll say LAFC was pretty upset by that.
Yeah, as it is written now, yes. But to Dave's astute point, I think changes are coming, and again, I don't want to underestimate or forget, because I think we were all pretty cognizant, or maybe I brought it up and you guys realized it. I don't know how your brains work, but it is very obvious why they released this piece of news at, what was it, like 6 p.m. on a Friday? No one's paying attention. I think we're even fortunate to have 11 people or whatever the hell we have people watching on a Friday evening. So like, thank you, Jeff Reuters, or whatever your name is on Twitter, for spewing out these news, because honestly I didn't even check the press release. Granted, I was at the urgent care, but like I didn't even check my email. So like that's just how obvious it is that the MLS wants to bury the hell out of this lead.
Dan brings up another great point. What about the Canadian version, the Canadian Championship that we have? Their winner goes to the CCC. So why won't the U.S. Open Cup? It's a great point, Dan. There's so much that we still have to unwrap. I do think Dave is right. I think the MLS Cup runner-up will advance over them because of what's going on right now. Does that make it right? No, I completely disagree with it. I'm just saying Dave has a great point.
Is there a world where yes, there's a universe. I'm a believer in multi-universe, and not because I just watch Marvel movies, but like there's a universe maybe where like the Union and Union 2 are drawn into the U.S. Open Cup in some way, shape, or form in the future. Like Marlon LeBlanc,
for the CCC.
Yeah, Marlon LeBlanc is somehow still a Union coach, which to me would be surprising. He's so talented that he should be moving along, but like there's a world where maybe this happens. You know, it's unbelievable. The Union 2 continue to progress, and shit, Subaru Park, Union 2 versus Union. Can you imagine that?
The civil war of the MLS. It's exciting to think about. So here's my take on it. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's not a good point. Whatever. Actually, I'll bring up Mike's point real quick. The expanded CONCACAF slots makes the USOC less crucial for MLS. 10 MLS teams qualified this year. And that's, again, a great point, Mike. So Jose, did you go to the U.S. Open Cup finals back when they were at PPL or Talent Energy, whatever it was at that time?
No, at the time I think that was like 2014, maybe. Was that the Seattle game? I can't even remember.
Seattle and Kansas City. The Nagir hit the post. Nagir hit the post, I think, against KC. I could be wrong there. Could have been Seattle. I forget.
Yeah, I was out at Shippensburg, so I was past Harrisburg with very little money as a college kid. So no, I was not able to be there. I watched it on my brand new iPad at the time.
I watched it. I cried. I got my bread on the way out of the park, and I went home. So, and Dan in the comments says he has PTSD still from that. So do I. But that's kind of when the union really stuck on me. I was like, I'm addicted to this kind of stuff now. So the problem with the U.S. Open Cup, at least from my perspective, is that it's just never been advertised well enough ever. Even at those Open Cup final games, there was maybe 40% field capacity, 50%. It was never something that fans went to. The diehard fans like us, 100%, we went to that. U.S. Open Cup has always been catered more to the diehard soccer fans in this country. It was never advertised well across any of the platforms on a regular basis. It was never just on a random TV channel, right? You had to watch a Bleacher Report or YouTube or whatever stupid stream they had going. So the MLS did this to themselves. If they promoted it better and at a higher rate and made these games more appealing to watch, you probably would have gotten more fans. You probably would have gotten more interest in it. But the problem is the casual fans, and casual fans are what make these teams money, not the diehard fans. It's the casual fans that make teams money. Just didn't give a shit about it. They just didn't. And the problem is the MLS teams themselves also didn't care about it. You saw the Union 2 years ago trotting out this B-list lineup against everything. The teams that were really qualifying, and here we go. Melissa says, it's impossible to explain to a casual fan. That's another great point. And we have a Go Birds chant. Go Birds, of course, as always. Thank you. The problem is that these MLS teams equally did not care. So you have teams who were good enough to compete for the MLS Cup or the Supporter Shield didn't care. You had majority of fans who really didn't care. You have an umbrella company, the MLS, who doesn't want to promote it that well. So for this all to happen now isn't surprising. It's really not. And if you asked everybody before this past season started, rank all the trophies in order. Which one is the one you want to win the least and which is the one you want to win the most? Majority of people, including the three of us, said U.S. Open Cup was the least important out of all the other tournaments, including Leagues Cup. So MLS saw this and said, well, fuck it. I'm going to get rid of this tournament. The players are complaining they're playing too much. Nobody's watching these games. We're not going to spend the money to advertise it. So, yeah, it sucks. I like the tournament for what it is, but the reality is it just didn't make the league any money. And it sucked. And wait, go ahead.
No. All I want to say is, and I've seen this criticism, and you're gonna think that I am a shill for this umbrella company, this multi-million, now probably billion-dollar company. Not billion, certainly not billion, but $1 million company in terms of MLS. But yes, Don Garber made very inflammatory comments last year in terms of the U.S. Open Cup, complaining to whoever it was, the main person for the U.S. Open Cup, basically flat out saying, you need to figure out the pitches. We cannot be trotting out MLS players on some of these fields. Meanwhile, we have Seattle, we have fucking New England, right? And playing on turf where players hated, running 90 minutes feels like, yeah, thank you. You have players trotting out on turf that makes their body feel after 90 minutes like they played 1.5 matches. So that's bullshit, Don. Whatever. Like, what a shitty thing to say because you want to prove your point or whatever. Just dick measuring contest, whatever. And I'm sorry I'm cursing so much, but like, I also want to be very clear to those who are asking for Don Garber to leave or Don Garber shitting the bed because of the tough week that we've had in terms of MLS roster news that we were expecting, that nothing came. And I think maybe we'll touch on that very lightly. But like,
yeah, sure.
Don't lose track that this man, for as much hatred as he's getting right now, is the sole reason why the league is as big as it is now. And yes, you're going to think I'm a shill, but this man multiplied the value of this league, the value of the teams over the past however many years. I think he's the sole commissioner so far for this league. So he has actually been good for this league. Whether you want to believe it or not, financially, he has done that. He's brought stability across, whether you agree with it, again, parity across the rosters, right? The rosters rules are there to make sure that the middle teams have a way to compete with the top and the bottom.
Right.
No one can deny that. But Don Garber has actually been good for this league. And that's maybe where I'll end. Just to be super transparent, that's where I stand on it. And whether you agree with it or not, that's a completely different conversation. But there's, I think, very little denying that can be done that he has actually been good for the league in his time.
I think fans are also upset that Leagues Cup got so much advertisement and attention and promotion. They had their own fucking song, for crying out loud, that Jose listens to on a daily basis, still to this day. They did
I do.
so
It
much.
showed up on my recap as like, oh, this is one of your highest played songs. What were you doing in July and August? I was blasting this shit nonstop.
I think people were upset that he focused so much promotion on that and then did so little for Open Cup. Because even this season, when it was still relevant, I didn't see it ever posted online anywhere besides the regular, Twitter feeds for the individual teams. And it's not like the blueprint's not there. Look at other leagues across. Look at NBA right now. The NBA in-season tournament promoted the hell out of it. They had players talking about on social media. They changed the courts for it. They catered as much as they possibly could to get attention to this in-season tournament. And guess what? The stands were packed for the tournament every single time. It did put out a good product overall, and it was exciting to watch. And we all said the same thing about Leagues Cup. It was exciting to watch. The stands were actually relatively filled for all those home games for the Union. They did a better job advertising it. So, I don't know. The casual fans are still who MLS has to cater to. They're not doing a great job of doing that with this whole Apple subscription thing that most fans don't want to pay for. So they're shooting themselves in the foot for that. But I do give them credit for at least saying, we got to do something for these players. Let's get rid of this tournament in terms of priority, and let's focus more on the player safety for now and where the money's going for that. But go ahead.
That to me is such a funny comment because it's true. In terms of,
it's true. It's 100% true.
When we were sitting there, Mike, I had officially told you, like, hey, I just figured this out. Hear me out and tell me if it's crazy. The MLS creates a separate company to run Leagues Cup, so it's like money going from one pocket, exchanging hands, and going to the other. Because what was his name? Mohenry, who is the interpreter for the Philadelphia for Leagues Cup, who was there, and I became buds with him because I saw him in Philadelphia, saw him in DC, and saw him again in Philadelphia after the Messi game, and Monterrey as well. I just got to talk to him. So, like, yeah, it's absolutely because Leagues Cup is an MLS product that it's getting so much attention, and frankly going to be, I think, unfortunately, whether or in my opinion, fortunately, because I actually rate Leagues Cup better than US Open Cup, and that's probably sacrilegious to a lot of American soccer fans, but I like the international component more than the domestic component of playing Westchester Predators or American Ukrainians out of the Philadelphia area. That's nothing against them, but like I rather see the Philadelphia Union face off against Pachuca, Monterrey, Querétaro, America, etc., Juarez, etc.
And that's
just my point.
You're going to hate me for this, Jose. I'm making a college basketball reference. You're going to hate me. Non-conference for college basketball. You see it in football too, college football. You see Alabama playing a bunch of whoever the hell university, right? Same with college basketball. See Gonzaga playing against St. Thomas or whatever. It doesn't attract people. Those upsets that we've talked about, that Dan and Mike have brought them up, they're great. I love the Pittsburgh win as far as it did. They just don't happen that often. But for the casual fans, they don't want to see, to your point, those low-level teams are just going to get blown out by 40 or by 10 goals, whatever. So what college basketball is doing recently is they've been having non-conference play be more competitive and having the Big East go against the Big 12 and making that part of the schedule so much better to attract the fans. That's it. It's just simply knowing what's attractive and selling it. And it's so easy to do, which I guess to your point, the MLS is doing with Leagues Cup. It is a good product in a nutshell, for sure.
It's just the timing, right? It's
the timing. It's 100% awful. Yeah.
If the Leagues Cup was spread out and not just 1 month block, if it was incorporated like any other international leagues or like weaved in within the schedule of the league and other competitions, it would probably make more sense. But because everything shuts down from this month to this month, that's where we get really sort of frustrated. To Mike's point, and Dave, I'll flip it over to you in just a second. Sure, it already happened in CONCACAF Champions Cup or Champions League back then, or just last year. But not everybody got a chance, right? Now you have, sorry, Kevincho, but or Kevin Lopez, whoever you want to call him, follow him on Twitter and Twitch. But Sporting Kansas City is not qualifying for the CONCACAF Champions Cup anytime soon.
No,
I don't think so. So they're never going to get that opportunity unless they do well in Leagues Cup and they draw. And we saw it, at least the initial draw. It guarantees you playing against Mexican teams, against competition that's international and probably higher level. Unfortunately, again, nothing against those teams. that's higher than playing against the Westchester Predators or a USL team. Just my 2 cents. And maybe I just leave it at that.
But
Dave, I'll
now,
flip it over to you.
yeah,
'cause
go
you've been
ahead, Dave.
listening so attentively.
I was just going to say, how many Mexican teams actually are going into the new reformed CCL for how they're calling it now? Because I mean, like, because again, if you're going to get 10 MLS teams and let's say 10 Mexican teams, like the group, the whole knockouts would just be Leagues Cup 2.0 with just half the incentive. Does it then do these MLS teams and League MX teams and go, well, already playing each other in the Leagues Cup? Is the CCL that important? Because you're going to play each other again. Like, does it then devalue the CCL, or is it the MLS's ploy to try and bring the CCL under their own?
Oh my God. It's so funny you mentioned this, Dave, because I was actually talking to a good friend of the show, Todd Lewis, Jillian, and Kyle separately, in terms of there's a world where the Union, who just got drawn to go into Costa Rica against Saprissa again.
Let's go.
But if they win, they go to Pachuca. And then if they win, I think they play potentially America. And there's again a universe where they will potentially be drawn with them into a group, right, for Leagues Cup. So like it could be again seeing the same teams over and over again, which has been the complaint of other people in the press of like once the Union ended up playing against Red Bulls in New England in terms of Leagues Cup playoffs, like people were bitching and moaning about it. It's like, oh, it's like US Open Cup all over again. Well, like shit, like who could have predicted that? Like, be happy that they play Atlas and they played Monterrey and they play all these other teams before you start bitching about them playing against New England and the Red Bulls. Just my 2 cents again, or DC, whatever it was.
I think again, as you sort of said though, I think as Dan sort of mentioned throughout the show, like again, it's the MLS is afraid of, a USL team or another team somehow winning the Open Cup or doing unthinkable and actually winning the entire thing, and the MLS thinking, "Oh crap!" Like, do you know what I mean? Which is obviously again why the US game is so different in comparison to everywhere else, and again, I think it perhaps does somewhat reign true that apart from the Eagles winning the Super Bowl in 2017, like, has there ever really been a proper true underdog upset like in the top level of America? When was the last time that actually happened? Like, again, you sort of see with the college football playoffs, Florida State.
Wait, what did you just ask?
In terms of like underdogs, in terms of like recent American sporting history, apart from the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, the backup quarterback and half their roster injured. When was the last real time that an underdog actually went out there and caused a shock and won a major title? Because you think the college football game, like, of course, everyone's sitting there going, well, Florida State got taken out because I think their quarterback got injured. Like, do Americans really enjoy the underdog stories, or do they just prefer the big dogs to continue?
It depends. It depends on the league, and it depends on how it's advertised. The reason why March Madness is as profitable as it is because the underdogs are very much alive. That is the one league that actually promotes your brackets to just go to shit, because they want St. Peter's and FAU and UMBC against Virginia way back when, a couple of years ago. They want those things. And that's the thing, is the MLS could have seen Pittsburgh Riverhounds and all these other, USL teams advancing, and they could have promoted. Look at the talent in America. Look at how the leagues are growing. Let's emphasize this competition and show how the gap is closing between these two leagues. Instead, they just poo-pooed it away.
Yeah. The last time,
Dave, to your point, it has to be done correctly. Go ahead, Jose.
The last time that the U.S. Open Cup was won by a team outside of MLS, and this is off of Wikipedia, and I hope I'm reading this right. When can you think it was the last time that a U.S. Open Cup was won by someone outside of MLS?
Probably early 2000s.
Okay, Mike?
I'd say 2004, 2003, yeah. Sure.
1999, when the Rochester Rhinos beat the Colorado Rapids at the Columbus Crew Stadium 2-0 in front of, and again, we don't talk about the financials often because it's not popular, it's not sexy, right? It's people are thinking with emotion rather than what actually moves this industry, right? Which is money. Let's just be super clear and open about that. Yeah. You know how many people watched that game, the Rochester Rhinos versus Colorado Rapids in Columbus, Ohio?
Probably
4,500 people.
And they were all relatives of the people for Rochester.
Versus in 2000, when the Chicago Fire play the Miami Fusion in Chicago, Illinois. 19,000 people.
Yeah. It's a big
So
difference.
again, like it's unfortunate. I feel so bad for those USL teams and whatnot that they don't get the opportunity to go to a Subaru Park or Geodis Park or go to flashy, I guess it's called BMO Field now out in LAFC. But like, it's tough, man. That like even talking to a source who works in the ticketing office, like no sweat off their back. He's like, the union don't really hold or haven't really had the opportunity to hold home games for the US Open Cup in a little while in terms of group play or I guess leading into the later stages. But like, dude, like no skin off his bag. He's like, no one really buys these anyways. So like,
exactly. Again, the diehard fans that we see in the Twitter sections or Twitter
so bad, Mike, before I forget, so bad that the union actually lump in some US Open as a benefit in the future, like if it ever happens, but like a US Open Cup is part of the season ticket member package, 1 or 2 games or whatever it is.
So, the people who care about US Open Cup will be upset, but unfortunately, they are such a small percentage. The team's not going to give a shit at the end of the day because it's saving them money doing this in the long run. But I was going to say also, yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, it just highlights how big the cultural differences of the game in America in comparison to like all over Europe and even like Argentina and Brazil. Like you think like, as you sort of said, like these fans who probably either root for an MLS team. Well, I feel like the consensus of the game in America, tell me if I'm stereotyping or I'm wrong, is football's rubbish. How can you watch a game for 90 minutes and it end in a tie, end in a draw? Having then watched the Vikings and Raiders game for 3.5, 4 hours on Sunday. Or the American game's crap. I'd rather watch the Premier League or La Liga or Bundesliga, and I root for a team there. Or I like the MLS, or I just root for the generic fans like you guys who appreciate the game. You got the 3 levels, but I sort of feel like the main, you sort of alluded to earlier, like the casual fans probably, or the casuals, go in those first 2 brackets of why would you watch a game that ends in a draw, or I support a Premier League team, or I only watch Arsenal, I watch Manchester City, Man United.
And
do you know what I mean? That's half the issue. Whereas if you look in England, like you're going to have 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people at a 4th division game tomorrow, and at the Gills game, like that'd be unheard of in America.
Up the Gills.
But I mean, do you mean it should be unheard of? And you're speaking like the FA Cup, like even like the Bundesliga, the upsets are just. They're fawned over. Like do you know what I mean? Like I remember a few years ago when Wigan were in the 3rd tier and they beat Manchester City in the FA Cup. Like that was a massive deal. When Bradford got to the semi-finals of the FA Cup after beating Chelsea and stuff. Like that's sort of stuff that the FA Cup is like that. Like people get so excited about when it comes to the FA Cup, and you just think if I think the US Open Cup that could have been up. Like if, as you sort of allude to, Mike. Advertising the games, building up the competition is is essentially how you do increase the game and grow fans. Like if things are actually done properly, you could have improved the level of the USL. You could have got more fans coming into tickets, into the stadiums and watching games more consistently. You could improve the attendances at MLS stadiums as well. But it's a shame to see. But as Jose's alluded to as well, it's unfortunately football is a money business, and it's a tournament that's losing money. I think and unfortunately I think the FA Cup's going the same way. The Premier League, the top 6 of the Premier League, continuously trying to take over English football and trying to rule it from the top 6, and then trying to rule it from their pedestal. And I think they essentially got I think they've essentially outruled, or they've gotten replays banned, or they're getting rid of replays just purely because of the top 6, because they play an extra few games a year and they don't like that. Whereas most of these teams don't even play more games in a team in Gillingham's division. But
and
I think,
so Jim brings up the point, and Dave, you brought up my point I was actually going to bring up as well. He says international soccer fans live and breathe based on their soccer teams. Unfortunately, U.S. soccer fans do not have that same passion for soccer. And that's the thing. We have to have an honest discussion about this. Dave, we asked you, I think, 2 years ago, when did Gillingham first start? 1800s?
God,
18 something.
Late 1880s, I believe.
Okay, great. The union started
my
2010. 2010 was right where Jose was that how long ago the union started around there?
Yeah.
approximately.
Yeah.
The history isn't there yet. To have casual fans that fill stadiums, you have to have a long-standing history. So MLS and Garber and all these people are saying, okay, we've only been around for almost 30 years approximately. Where can we best spend our money? It's not going to be on the Westchester, Rochester Rhinos, whoever. It's going to be on these big teams who have these big name owners like Will Ferrell and James Harden, who was at the Open Cup for Houston, all that kind of stuff. That's what's going to attract people right now. So let's put the money to that. If the league is just not as old as all these other, even college football, basketball, all these teams, these underdogs have long-standing history along with their more achieved opponents where the fans are going to go to these things. You're just not going to have that here. To Jim's point again, soccer is just not there yet in this country. It's getting there. I think all the diehard soccer fans like us want it to be there, but it's just not yet. And when it's not there yet, the leagues have to act accordingly to make sure they actually profit at the end of the day, not promoting some tournament that's not going to get anybody there.
I wanna give credit to I didn't do this research, so I can't take credit for it. But Sully, good old Sully, right? Negadelphia through and through, but such a nice guy
so
from time to time too. KP Sullivan on Twitter. The last time the Union held a U.S. Open game, when do you think it was?
2023. It's probably 2017, 16.
August 8th, 2018.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's a luck of the draw, whatever. I don't know. Maybe there's other factors that I'm not thinking about. Two glasses of wiggle down, but like, yeah, it's depressing for all the right reasons, but also, again, thinking about the dollars and cents, which I know a lot of people don't like to think about, and I hate to think myself as a spreadsheet person, right? I don't want to think that teams and people are just numbers, but ultimately, when you think about, again, as our good friend Andrew V, who is a sports lawyer, put it out earlier this last night, people don't realize that the world of professional soccer worldwide is in a dire situation where a lot of these teams are actually in the red and function on the red just in hopes that someone else, just like the tech industry, someone else is going to scoop in and buy them and then make more money off of them and sell them to the next person and the next person and the next person. So it is what it is. It's an unfortunate reality of where professional soccer's at right now. But again, happy for players like Andre Blake, who's doing great stuff on and off the field with a soccer clinic out in Jamaica, who's getting some more rest if the Union were to go into later stages of the season. And we haven't even touched upon this, and maybe we don't have time on it, but like this summer's going to be a mess. So like, do we really want the U.S. Open Cup to be part of the Philadelphia Union schedule when you think about Copa America, Euro 2024, the Olympic Games all happening, plus Leagues Cup, all within that tight window? Maybe not. So, for what it's worth.
I know I don't. An hour and 3 minutes, gentlemen. Let's wrap it up for the night. I'll read the sponsors real quick. Any last comments, flood them through. We'll answer them right before we get off. All right. AllState Insurance Agency-Debora Sigler, 6750 Iroquois Trail number 3 at Allentown, PA, specializing in insurance for auto, home, renters, life, and much more. Get a quote today by calling 610-395-6100. We have Vinny's Pizza. Discover a new favorite by trying their top pizzas in Allentown, plus pasta, salads, calzones, sandwiches, and more. Check out their menu at vinnyspizza.restaurant.com. We have Stuff the Grills, offering a unique twist on a traditional sandwich shop. They have homemade hot and cold sandwiches, salads, appetizers, and baked goods available for all events. Dave, we have a Gillingham watch party tomorrow in Jersey. We're going to be ordering from Stuff the Grills, of course, to watch your hometown club. And then we have Manscaped. Get 20% off by using the code AAT Sports at manscaped.com. And that is our sponsor read. Dave, last thoughts, comments, Gillingham plug. Here you go. Here's your chance, buddy.
Obviously, Jill's playing tomorrow night. Today here, actually. Obviously, it's 3 a.m. in the UK now. Yeah, Jill's playing later today, 3 p.m., 10 a.m. Eastern. Yeah, looking forward to the game. But again, I mean, I guess it's just been a very, very weird week for them, for the US game. I mean, not the worst week for the Union. You know, getting a couple of signs in, perhaps increasing optimism for the Union. Of course, looking into the new season. Just, it's a shame that you can't actually really get to watch preseason games over here because, again, these two new guys, and even players like, I don't know how long Odada's going to be on loan for, but you get the opportunity to see these younger players and these players that we wouldn't see in competitive formats. I don't know if the union will stream out the preseason games. I don't think they did last year, did they, Jose? Be interesting to see if they perhaps change it this year. Maybe we should give you the opportunity to see these younger players play as opposed to getting a tweet from from the union social media account of the Inquirer saying the union won 4-3 earlier in a preseason game. Do you know what I mean? It'd be quite nice to actually see these younger players play and actually get some minutes.
That's such a good question, Dave. I wonder, because the Apple TV infrastructure was so young then, I wonder if that's a requirement now for preseason games to be streamed. It's content.
I would like that. Dave, we have a question for you as well from Jim. Do international countries, let's focus on England here, sports fans have as many sports options as U.S. sports have?
Think about Spain. Think about Spain as well. That's a big country for sports.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you got football, rugby, cricket, obviously obviously basketball over here probably isn't as big, but I think it is getting more popular. I think obviously in terms of viewing numbers, the NFL as well is very, very popular in the UK. I think as everyone probably knows with the yearly London games, but the three main sports are rugby, football, and cricket. Which, again,
he's a shit all over. Oh god! Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, obviously, I mean, again, like the US, again, the main US sports are sort of all in their own bubbles, really. I think I know people will shit on stuff like cricket and rugby, but they are global sports. More people, I think cricket is the most popular sport in the world. So
it is.
Again, they're all global sports, and they're just sort of the main three in the country. And you've got rugby. Oh, sorry, with rugby, you've got rugby union and rugby league, which adds a nice little dimension to things. But they're sort of the main sports, and of course the World Darts Championships on the moment. So that's going to get everyone ticked over for the Christmas period.
To Jim's question, can't forget, like in Spain, for example, because I maybe follow maybe it's the language, right? I listen to both South American news and Spain Spanish news, but like when you think of Real Madrid and Barcelona, you're not just thinking about the soccer teams. There's basketball, there's volleyball, there's all types of sports that are all sort of part of the sporting system. So and they're wildly popular.
Yeah, I was going to say darts is actually one of our big sports as well, and only in darts could a guy be plumbing at 11 and then playing live on national television at 8 p.m. and winning a match. So
golf.
That seems like a very British sport. Darts. I don't know. That just seems
golf as well,
like you're in a pub just throwing it.
Darts, on a stage in front of like 3,000-4,000 people live on national TV. Incredible. This is the Christmas period for darts is the best time of year with the World Championships.
Or what's his name? John Daly with his wild clothing, ripping a cigarette or a cigar, and just doing these trick shots on the golf course. Like, it's unbelievable.
John Daly is the most American golfer that's ever lived. Just a beer drinking fat, doesn't care about whatever.
Mate, darts, what sport? But yeah, of course. I mean, obviously for you guys, I mean, your final thoughts, obviously, on what has been a very, very, very weird Friday evening.
Jose, it's been a fun Friday, Jose. Go ahead. You go next.
Yeah, aside from the disappointing news for some in terms of the U.S. Open Cup, we think about, I always mention my good friend Andrew V, or our sports lawyer friend, for no apparent reason, right? The NBA in-season tournament final was the most watched non-Christmas NBA game during the regular season in nearly 6 years. The inaugural game averaged 4.5 million people viewers across ESPN2 and ABC. That's a shit ton of people. For those that are not figuring out what that means, that's a ton of people who are watching a random first-time tournament in American sports. But
our buddy Johnny says John Daly's the fat uncle that comes over and you hope gets drunk and embarrasses himself, and that's great, Johnny. Go ahead, Jose. Finish up your thought there.
All in all, it's an exciting week, right? I think again, really proud of the coverage we're providing in terms of tweeting news and creating content, sharing videos, sharing clips. Continue to follow us, all of us, and we'll never take any followers for granted. But some really exciting stuff I'm cooking. I believe I can announce it now, barring any disasters in scheduling. But I have two former players, one Philadelphia Union player and one Orlando City player, who are going to sit with me to talk about what it's like to go through an off season where you are waiting for your contract option to be accepted or be declined, and what that feeling is like as a human versus seeing a faceless tweet or a faceless, press release just suddenly release that you're no longer part of the team versus being someone whose contract offer is accepted and you're suddenly getting $100,000 raise, right? So really exciting conversation coming up that's being recorded next Tuesday evening. And then working on another one with a former goalkeeper from the early 2000s and a current top-notch journalist to talk about the role of media and how it's developed from MLS 1.0/2.0 to what we see today. So some really exciting conversations that I'm working on here for all of you, and I think you all will enjoy it.
Jose's cooking, man. Dave, where does he find the time? My goodness. I feel like Jose every second, like, hey, by the way, what?
He's a machine.
He is a machine. Next Jose's gonna be like, I'm interviewing Don Garber tomorrow. Gonna discuss
it's unfortunate because I actually had a list of like maybe 6 or 7 questions, but I was which is another thing I want to mention. I was actually making my way back from North Carolina when the State of the League address was happening. So I was eager to jump on the Zoom and ask some questions. But to that note, I just want to thank everybody. I don't usually share too much of my personal life on Twitter. I do it on Facebook due to family in South America, but really appreciate everybody's support in terms of the sudden passing of my brother, 36 years old, which is unbelievable to me, even to this date, as a 33-year-old man. So I just want to thank everybody for the well wishes, the thoughts, the prayers, whatever. I really appreciate all of it. Not something I ever wish anybody to go through, but nonetheless, I just haven't had the chance to reply, and frankly, I don't know that I will. Since I don't think I have it in me to go through all of those messages. But I really appreciate everybody taking the time to even drop a word or a like or whatever. Just we're all just so fragile as humans. Just remember to take care of one another. And whether you realize it or not, we're all just 1 second away from being a memory.
That's true. That's why we do this stuff, Jose. I remember I said, do you guys want to take a pause? Jose's like, no, we're doing this. And I think that's what the union do for us. And the union in general, just any soccer, sports, Eagles, whatever, whether they win or lose, it takes you away from reality for about 3 to 4 hours or so. Lets you escape. So it's been. I'm glad that we've been able to at least work through it with you. Hopefully, giving you an outlet to kind of just get your mind away. But
yeah, and that's what I mentioned to both of you, right? Like such a great distraction to. Yes, as I'm working through grief, even today, 2.5, 3 weeks removed, as I see pictures all over the place and think about him. Talking with you guys for an hour and 13 minutes was just such a nice relief from heartbreaking situation that I'm going through and probably will go through for the rest of my life. So again, just a gigantic thank you to everybody for the condolences and messages. It's unbelievably kind and not something I was asking or searching for, but rather just putting out that, like, at that point, I think we were still waiting for roster news or something that, listen, I just got back from North Carolina, had a hell of a weekend with 2 viewings and putting my brother 6 feet under. I am done for the day. Like I got to tap out, and, I was not expecting the response. So thank you so much to everybody.
Yeah, I think it's a good segue for this upcoming season. It's in 2 months away, with CCC basically starting in a blink of an eye. We made a lot of good relationships this year. I hope that everybody in the comments section who listens to us, again, come out, meet us. Jose and I, we're there almost every other tailgate as much as we possibly can to build these relationships that we have with the people we've met over the past season. So we appreciate all the interactions. And again, hopefully grow and unlike U.S. Open Cup, we'll promote ourselves better and grow and hopefully get a lot of followers, and we'll meet a lot of you at the tailgates and share some beers and have a good time. Besides that, it's Friday night. I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. We are across the pitch. We are on every Monday night, 8:45 p.m. on the AAT Sports Network, coming and going through the offseason. Once Bedoya news comes out, we're probably going to go live again to discuss that, along with everything about Kai, et cetera, et cetera. Besides that, Dave is Dave GFC Miller. That way, Dave GFC Miller on Twitter. Follow him also for Gillingham coverage. He does awesome with them. Jose R. Nunez 91, or Jose Nunez 1991 on YouTube, if I remember that correctly. I know your handle's better than you. I know.
You do.
And then myself, Embraer1323 on Twitter. Right now, it's mainly college basketball on Twitter. By the way, UConn and Gonzaga play in 2 minutes. That is across the pitch. Go Union. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.